I'll tell you, so I have this lucky necklace that a friend of mine gave it to me like on my first talk or something.
Yeah.
So I always wear it, so I put it on election day, and I have this little cardinal because I have this thing with cardinals and my grandma.
Yeah.
Because I was like, we need all the luck we
Exactly.
can get. So I didn't take it off. I went to bed that night, Tuesday night. I'm like, I'll just keep it on. Who knows what's going to happen? I woke up, didn't want to turn my phone over. I was terrified. Turned the phone over. I was like, it's not over. I'm like, I can't take this thing off. Here. Thank you. And just as a reminder to my fellow board members to speak right into your microphone so that those who are watching us online can hear everything. Lily, could you please lead us in the pledge? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order, so we will move to public communications. These are comments on topics of interest from the public, and board members do not respond to these comments. I will go first to those who've signed up in advance. And the first person is Brian Fleming. Brian, are you on the call? Is Brian Fleming on the call for public comment? If not, I see a phone number ending in 46. Would you like to provide public comment? No? No. Okay.
Is there anyone else? I don't think we have anyone else on the call with us for public comment. So we'll move on to the next item.
And if there are individuals who wish to make public comment, you can call in towards the end of the meeting, and we will have another public comment period then. We do not have any unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business. And the first item is item A, motion to designate weather-related closures as remote learning days, with a recommendation that the Board of Education allows the designation of snow days as remote learning days for the 2020-2021 school year, consistent with State Department of Education's guidance. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Basically, this is a one-year question as to what we do. This isn't a state, this isn't in perpetuity granted by the state. This is an option that we have this year, how we look at snow days. So, I'll turn it over to Dr. Morrow.
Yes, Tom said that the State Board of Education made the declaration in late October for us that we have the option of using snow days and counting them as remote learning days. And so what we would propose doing just for this year is to go ahead and designate days. We would try and do it ahead of time, knowing that bad weather was coming so that people had a chance to plan as parents, as teachers and such, and would count these instructional days as our remote days, so we wouldn't have to then add them to the calendar at the end of the day. What the state has directed is that we have to have a minimum of 4.5 hours, like we do oftentimes for our early release days when we have snow events. We have to have 4.5 hours for elementary and 5 hours from secondary, but that's a 50-50 split between synchronous time and asynchronous time. So really at the secondary level, we're looking at a morning session for students to be engaged in online in classes, and then there's additional work in asynchronous time that would be available at their leisure. And so the idea would also be that if we have widespread power outages because of damage or because of ice, that we would go ahead and add those dates to the end of the school year. It was something that would prevent students or staff from screening that day. Any questions that we can answer? Our recommendation would be to go ahead and, as the state has said, and most districts are doing, go ahead and accept this and as the path forward.
And I want to stress, as Andy says, that this is our recommendation based on the state analysis. Not every district is doing it. You know, we're not anti-snow day monsters. We kind of we understand the kind of New England pleasure of the snow day. This year, I think there's an added thought of we'd like the 2020-2021 school year to come to a conclusion for people to have a summer this summer that's longer if possible. Like Andy said, I think that we're not talking about a full day, but in truth, you know, I'm working during the summer, we're working during the summer. This really falls under the calendar uniquely to the board. So again, it's our recommendation. Most districts are doing this, some are not. It's not a decision that you'll be into in perpetuity. It's really a 2020-2021 school year decision. And then perhaps the state changes the regulations and it's something you could look at in the future. But this is a this year question.
So I know there are a bunch of questions. We'll start with Ari.
That's a good question, Ari. Thank you. What we would do for that is, although we usually wait and make calls at 5:30 in the morning, sometimes, as you've noticed in the past couple of years, if we know there's going to be a weather event, and we know that there's something that's going to impact transportation and the safe passage to and from school, I'll call ahead and we'll make that decision the night before. And so this is really a situation like that, where we know that there's going to be an issue. There's very, very few times that we're caught flat-footed with any type of weather event. This is usually the way forecasting works. We have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen at least 24 hours ahead of time. So this would give us an opportunity to, the day before, to say that we're going to have a remote day tomorrow, so that people can plan ahead with it, so that teachers can plan ahead, make sure they take home the laptops and other equipment that they might need. And then during that day, what we do, and Paul can develop and has been working with the elementary principals on and the secondary principals, is a very simple schedule that would go into place. And remember also that it's a 50-50 split between synchronous and asynchronous. And so there's plenty of time for people to still go build snowmen during that day, but it gives people also a sense of planning ahead of time so that we're not doing the 5:30 in the morning calls.
And the truth is, as far as what that day's schedule would be like, I purposely hold back from finishing the creation of it just because I don't want to do all that work if we're not going to do it. But yeah, we're pretty good at idea now. The truth is, like some things people think, well, we never have to change the schedule for RLE, so we're all over stuff. But that actually won't be the case because everything we have teachers shared in the different places, so we kind of have to parallel all of them. One of the other competing factors that this may be a benefit towards is delays. Those days where, okay, we can't get there then, but maybe we can come in at 9. Well, with the way our schedule is structured, that's a pretty short day this year. And so if we do ahead of time, okay, that's still going to be a remote learning day. And it takes away that kind of early morning decision.
Yep. Yeah, because, I mean,
More likely in some ways to declare a remote learning day the next day.
Something's iffy rather than trying to force in a 3-hour day at school at the middle and secondary levels.
Other questions? Jason?
All right, yeah, thank you.
Just put your microphone up. Not stuck.
Yep, sorry about that. Okay, so, and I know ultimately we may be talking about 2 days in this school year, maybe 5, maybe more. It's possible. Who knows? It's 2020, and anything is possible. So, but the thing that kind of triggered my thought about this policy is the attendance penalty for students that aren't able to log on for that portion. And if it is, say, 3 days, that could be 3 absences or three that could put a student in, push them into a threshold where they would be recognized as missing too many days. And so I just recognize that in the preparation for like hybrid and for remote learning, that there's a lot of thought and planning that goes into that, and that the ability of the district to respond to the needs of families has taken weeks to get to. And my concern is that jumping into a situation where there are lots of different kinds of family situations, that a surprise day of having to show up isn't going to manifest for everyone the same.
well, I mean, first off, and I appreciate your question, your comment in that, I would first tell you that, as far as attendance goes this year, the state has continued to be, and their direction is to be fairly lenient on that. So we're not compiling lists, and if someone had an issue, obviously, that they were unable to log in for
for some issue at home or whatever, that wouldn't be counted against them from an attendance standpoint. I think, so that's the one piece. And I think that our teachers and our staff have really gone to great lengths to make sure, as we've had to at various times this year, and we'll continue to have to, shift entire cohorts of elementary students or certain high school students when, for example, we had a situation where we had a contact at a soccer game. And so 42 students between the two high schools had to shift and to go online. And so I think we've been really good as far as planning for that and making sure that not only teachers but also parents had the tools that they need to continue accessing their education.
So, and the other piece of that would be the notification where we'd notify the schools, make an announcement at the end of the day, bring your computer home, bring this home, because there's a likelihood, I mean, there's a chance that we wouldn't wait till 6 or 10 o'clock to announce it. Or during school, tomorrow's going to be a remote learning day. That gives the teachers time to prepare, that gives the students time to prepare. So that would be the ideal. I think that's the thing to remember about this, is that we're doing this to improve the situation, not make it worse. And your advocacy, I completely agree with. And Andy's right, that's been one of our biggest challenges. But we didn't, all the tools that we've just given out more. We haven't pulled them back in. So we're at a position now where I feel pretty good about, I'm not saying it won't be universal, but that's a piece of it. And the other piece, and I'm glad Andy mentioned it, is the state, we're telling people not to come to school all the time, which seems counterintuitive to being a superintendent, but really, if you don't feel good, if you can't identify why, err on the side of caution. So that is something that, as far as punishments go, which isn't really your concern, nor is it my concern, but that piece we don't have to worry as much about with this. So that's the thought there.
Yep.
So, Jason, I've got a lot of questions, but to get to your point, back in March when this was first going on, there was a lot of trepidation about the online thing. We didn't know how it was going to work. It was a huge learning curve. We were passing out computers probably by the hundreds. Yeah, 2,000 computers. And they didn't go anywhere. But I was still nervous because there's those people who want to use it, not even probably more than that, that fall in the trap. But the solution and the amount of work that the administration did in the school really got a lot of those kids up and running. And now that we've been doing it for so long, I don't feel as apprehensive as we did back in March. So being through it, and I saw whatever you have 20 kids, it'll never get. And they have computers with phone access on it. Kids didn't have Wi-Fi at home. So they really done a great job. And I hear you, and that's a great question. It's just that if I could add a little more revenue, I think that we're down that path. The kids are almost subject matter experts at this point. So I hope that helps a little bit. It helps me at least. So I guess when I talked about this a month or so ago, I didn't know you had mentioned the state was looking at it. I didn't know that at that point. And I guess I wasn't looking at it normally for this year because I was optimistic, thinking that we'd be back in school full time and things like that. It was more of a perpetuity, really. That's, Tom, if there's anything that you could take back, and I don't know how the rest of it feels, but going forward, if we're in school full time, and we're back to normal, and this doesn't exist anymore, then I would imagine that we've been through that learning curve, and that those snow days could actually be done remote learning. When I looked at this briefly, and I looked at it, I'm all in for it. And you're probably surprised to hear me say this a little bit, but because I don't see light at the end of the tunnel right now, in the near future, at least in the seasonal future, I should say, the winter season, I almost think that, I'm saying this for argument's sake, I take your recommendation, but just as a point of discussion is that almost maybe the kids wouldn't even read, because they've been online so long. And it's counterintuitive of what I really was thinking, because this is something that I think that we should take full advantage of, going forward, so that, and just to maybe bring some of you guys up to speed, the reason we changed some of the calendars, we changed the calendar back, well, we used to go to last Wednesday in August, and that was by state mandate. That went away after 3 years, and we were able to make our own calendar again and start when we wanted to. And with the storms and snow days, and the heat in the schools without the air conditioning, said, wow, let's start a little later, and, you know, hopefully we can get out a little later there too, and maybe get some of those August hot days out of it. So there's a lot of reason, and the reason I was bringing up snow days too, doing it remotely, is to get a finite calendar, so that, you know, we all know that the people that say, I need a graduation date by, I normally can't do it by April 1st, by this, sometimes we get it out early, people want to plan, they want to fly in for it. Believe it or not, there's a lot of emails out there, how come you don't know graduation date? And my whole thought process was that if we were able to do that, we can really get within the post-school, last day of school, within 1 or 2 days, you know, power outages here and there, then you couldn't do remote learning. And your schedule would be much more adaptable, and it would be helpful for planning and all that. We even talked about, like, when we went late or went out too early, what do we do with the kids? They're missing camp, or now we got another 2 weeks because we're out so early, so what do I do with the kids for 2 weeks before camp starts? There was always a back and forth on things like that. But this year, 2020, is I mean, I say that for discussion about not having a snow day virtually, giving the day off. But that's only for discussion. I see the purpose behind it. I guess the other thing too is, what happens if there's and we have to play this by ear, what happens if you plan the day ahead of time, say, you know, noon, you're saying, okay, bring back your devices, bring home your devices, we're going to probably be out of school tomorrow. And then at like 10 a.m., power starts going out because wind builds up and things like that. You know, those are contingencies that we have to talk about. And then what times are you actually thinking about? Because I always thought maybe going even a little later, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes later on a snow day, so that parents have some opportunities to get what they need to get done in those days that we have snow days. So that's...
Yeah, I'll start with a couple and then you can add in, Andy. As far as the timeline goes, it's actually more difficult to start later than it is to end earlier. So we're far more likely to start school at the regular time but be out early, late morning, kind of like the emergency closing model now. That's because of scheduling and teachers sharing spaces, because it's not uniform when they share classes, and special education teachers, when people are online, they're checking in at set times. So to change that, you can't just purely bump everything off half an hour, unfortunately. It's an interesting point you raise about other years besides this, and it's in some ways moot to talk about it now because the state hasn't allowed it, but that is the kind of thought process where we went away from February vacation, one of the reasons being because we had so many snow days. Like, it's to talk about this now, we're thinking about the first snowfall and how exciting it is and to not have school and everything. The 6th, 7th snow day really stinks. And those are the ones where, in all honesty, you're questioning, do you push the envelope more and try to get the day in because there's been so many? So if this were the case in the future, it is something, if you had this, you could look at extending your February vacation back to a full week. That's something that's out there. That's a discussion for another day if this ever comes. As far as this year goes with a break, the thing about using this as a break is last year we basically didn't have snow days. So it's one of those where if we knew how many there would be, if we were only going to have 1 or 2 this year, I wouldn't bother bringing this up if you could tell me that then. But if you're going to have a couple, if you're going to have a few, this does kind of halt it from going into perpetuity as far as this goes. And as, I don't know, Andy, did I touch everything?
The question about if we have, again, if we have power outages, like in the guidance there, we would go ahead and add that day to the end of the year if it's impacted. If we're not able to get the time and the instruction in, then we're not able to count that as an instructional day.
Although even that would depend on where the power
Yeah,
outages
and
were,
how widespread, yeah.
It could very well count as a day. If
It
people
could.
were logged in at some point,
Yeah,
it would likely count as a day.
yeah, depending upon where it is and how widespread and such, yeah.
So the other thing too is that, you know, again, I was here for February, I sleep like such an old man, I've been here for all that. The vacation, we took February vacation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but back in the day, wasn't February vacation really scheduled to like air out the schools, and wasn't it for the flu season or something too?
That was an implied benefit. It wasn't really the purpose. The purpose of it was the energy crisis in the 70s. That's really when it started.
And then it became a ski holiday for people that was very difficult to get rid of at that time.
See how many emails we got from skiers
Yep.
when we took February vacation away. But, you know, I'm all for getting back to a normal schedule where we could actually plan and, but, you know, these kids, I just feel bad, so bad for them, you know.
Well, and again, I don't mean to be the Grinch during the holiday season, but we're talking about 2 hours or 2.5 hours of set time that's instruction. There's plenty of other time to go build snowmen and to sled and everything else. And
No, and I guess, you know, I remind myself why I sit here, and what we do is really to educate kids. And, you know, I was having a discussion earlier, you know, Alaska, they don't have snow days. You know, Arizona doesn't have snow days. So, you know, they have different things, but, you know, really at the end of the day is having kids either online or in a school learning, and that's why what we do.
Liz, and then Amanda.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. When I first heard about this, I thought it was sort of a no-brainer that, of course, we're remote. Why wouldn't we just not have snow days and go remote? But then, kind of to build off what Mark said, I started to think about it more and started to think, is there a middle ground that we could have? Not all or nothing. Could we say, okay, let's have 3 snow days this year, or whatever number? That way, we still would have control of the calendar, but we wouldn't strip that second grader of the joy, or elementary school kid of the joy of having a snow day, which, I mean, to Andy's point, yeah, you're only having 2.5 hours, but you still have to get up. You have to do the same thing you've done every day. And having a snow day, if you remember back to your childhood or your kid's childhood, it's really it's a joyous thing, and there isn't a lot of fun or joy this year. A lot of things have been lost. So it seems like maybe we could have a couple snow days if we actually do have snow. Just my comment.
Amanda.
I guess what I'm thinking about is I am confused about how to vote on this.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I am struggling a little with how to vote on this for a few reasons, because I like the application of it for situations where we might have normally called delays, so that we're not needlessly bringing teachers in who live in other areas or, you know, messing with the day-to-day schedule. So for that application, because that does come up a lot, I think this makes a lot of sense. From the teacher's perspective, I definitely don't like it for the kinds of days where we have a wallop of snow, because some of those teachers are like thinking about the families where teachers are married to one another and they have a caregiver who's coming into the home, and that person needs to be able to get into the house with the snow cleared and all the things that we know have to happen in order for the teachers to teach on a snow day like that. So for those reasons, maybe in those first couple of days, sort of the magic of the season, I understand that. And then just the practical side of making it possible for the teachers to get up and get going if they have someone in the household who needs to get out to work, who's not a teacher, people who are coming home from second and third shift. There's a lot of things that are happening in the morning to just deal with the snow. So the part about this that I don't like is for the days where we have significant snow, where I would be more in favor of this, just calling it a snow day so that the teachers could have as many options as they need to sort of handle things. But if we have a kind of winter where we have a number of snow days, then I like having this in place because we'll need to adjust. So I guess what I'm looking for is appreciate that this has come up from the state so that it gives us a fodder for conversation, but I think it's in our best interest to give you as much flexibility as possible to just make the call given the situation. So if it's a day, if we have 4 or 5 days in a row where it's going to be icy and sleet in the morning and it doesn't make sense to have everybody come in for a couple of hours, I'd much rather see us stay remote. But at the same time, I don't want to say, yes, make everything a snow day remote, because I just think that does create problems for the teachers that are significant and, you know, things that they would adjust to if there were a number of snow days. But, you know, it'd be nice because I could see you saying, okay, we're going to take a few of these days as true snow days. But if we get into if we have a February where we have, you know, weeks of snow that's significant enough, we don't want to have our hands tied by that where we could have been remote. I think the other complexity here is that, you know, one of the reasons why we're in hybrid 2.0 is because of our state requirement for those numbers of hours. So I guess what I'm wondering is, say we give you the go-ahead to make them snow days and use remote learning where it makes sense, knowing that you wouldn't have to call a snow day if you didn't want to, but that maybe if we are having a number of snow days and we need to, can we revisit this in January and February? I mean, it seems to me that we could always change our minds if now we have a lot of snow to deal with and we do need to make a different decision. Because I feel like we're all kind of on the same page with, we don't want to take away a true snow day, but we also want to make sure that we have some continuity of operations if it's on the fence. Because we don't want to have kids in the summer going to school when it's really hot. But the teachers are, you know, I think if we had 1,100 teachers outside, they probably would be very clear about what they would want. I would imagine.
Teachers probably don't want to add more days. That's similar childcare issues for them there. So that would be violating.
I think it's one of those where, you know, Andy and I have the unique pleasure over the years of making this call, and before COVID, it was the thing that got us attacked the most. So it's one of those things that snow day may not have the same magic to Andy and I as it does to many of you. But the truth is, for continuity purposes, what you're mentioning, I wouldn't split the baby in terms of we can decide which type it is that day based on what it's like, because I worry about the continuity with families and not knowing. So if you were trying to split the baby and said, well, we'll have one snow day, or we'll have 2 snow days, and then everything after that would be virtual, that I can understand. I mean, I'll be honest, it's 1 year, so I may not do it that way, but again, this is a board prerogative, and I'm not as, you know, this is your prerogative as to how you want to do this. I wouldn't let it be optional where now we're making a decision a day in advance that way about what type of snow it is, how big it is it ice? You know, because ice is the kind of thing that would be the most likely thing where you'd have to cancel because you'd be more likely to have power outages with that as opposed to the nice fluffy snowman snow. So, you know, we're going to be here in June and July anyway, so it's how you do it. But I do want to remove confusion for families because it is something, the real reason we've invested in the system with the different languages and the voice call where you don't hear Andy's voice in the morning, you hear a voice in your home language, because we always had so much confusion
over a snow day, over a delay, over when it starts, and all the things that go with that. So it's a really important thing to communicate very clearly and precisely, this is exactly what's going to happen if this happens. So that's why I'm kind of more in the either or than I am in the trying to do it both ways. But I understand the point. I'm not saying...
They're the ones who have to be teaching. So if their caregivers can't get into the house and because we have people who live in remote, I'm saying this because my husband wrote the mutual aid plan for our area for healthcare. So for years we watched the second and third shift medical people dealing with getting in and out of their homes at different hours to try to make sure they could get home for their kids or whatever they needed to do, which is still even more important now. So not everybody's on the same schedule. So I don't know if all of those teachers are going to be able to teach if they can't either get their own children out where they need to go or get caregivers in, or they live in remote areas where there's just a lot that they have to deal with their own snow management.
Yeah,
So-
it doesn't really change though, Amanda, from now because districts aren't universal with what they do. So people that don't live in town that have to come to work or don't have to come to work, we don't have universal Connecticut days even by town. West Hartford for years was more likely to come to school than our neighboring communities just because of the roads, the width, and everything else. So I get your point completely, but the decision about whether to have school or not on a given day is about the roads in West Hartford and the safety and passability of the roads in West Hartford for our students to get to school or not, and for our buses and our parents. That's really all we can take into account for that. And I'm not saying we don't take into account our workforce, but that problem exists either way, whether it's a cancellation or it's a virtual day.
Not really though, because if they have to teach, they have to be able to. I'm thinking about people who have children at home, the teachers. They need to be able to teach, and if they don't have the same ability to have their kids managed so they can teach, that's where I'm thinking. And I also am just wondering about, I don't know why it would have to be all or nothing, only because if we do have a lot of situations where we'd have delays, we certainly don't want to call, we certainly want to be able to utilize remote learning, I would imagine. But on those true snow days, it doesn't always make sense to call it a remote day because not everybody is going to be able to teach.
I guess you're not wrong, except we could have that situation happen in any of our schools tomorrow. In fact, we had today.
Yeah.
So that really isn't, and it sounds like, well, we don't. Of some districts closing, which I'll talk about in the superintendent's update, and us not, is that issue with our workforce. And if we ever have to close, it's probably going to be because of our workforce. But in and of itself, I see your point exactly. I understand it completely, and I understand. That's why I said maybe you do a limited number if that's what you want to do. I understand that point. But just in terms of if a teacher can't teach that day remotely, then they would have to call in sick that day and not work that day, and we'd have to have a substitute for that class, which we have now a system for that with virtual learning, which we've been operating. So that scenario is something that teachers are faced with, especially at the elementary, every day now as we're taking cohorts and putting cohorts into quarantine, and they may have children at home in the same situation. And in fact, it's a situation we had all through October and continuing now at the high schools when we're on every other week hybrid where teachers, their home district may not be, or their child's school may not be if they're at different levels. So that's a realistic situation, but it's a situation that people are already dealing with now.
Give you the flexibility to just make the call based on the situation, because I could see you saying, for the first couple of days, like, it seems like everyone's in the same place would love for the kids to, have those days where they have a fun snow day. And the teachers they get to sleep in and have a snow day. But yet, not for all of the other days where we might want to have that continuity of operation. So I guess it's the either or, all or nothing piece that I'm struggling with, because I guess I'm not understanding why we can't just give you this flexibility and have you kind of know what our hopes are, and then you make the call based on the situation.
I just think that leads to confusion for families. That's the reason why our experience is that we've had trouble days or otherwise. So I think families need to know what to expect. This is our emergency closing, or this is this. That's why we're always so explicit with it. So to be in between what type of day is it really and get that communicated out, I'm a little concerned about the ability to do that effectively if there's more than one option really on that day.
So would we still be utilizing delays?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Would we still be utilizing delays?
In all likelihood, when you factor in, and again, I'm a huge fan of delays. I've tried. We've done 2-hour delays on early release Wednesdays, which are fun. But when you look at the way our schedule is set up under hybrid 2.0 and so forth, a delay is not. We're running right up against busing issues with delays, and we'd have to do a schedule for that. So if we, again, the goal would be, if we know there's going to be a weather event, we would go ahead and forecast that and send that information before so that we're able to plan for it. If we have a situation where there's a freak storm that comes out of nowhere, and at 4:30 in the morning, Bob Palmer and I are driving around trying to figure out whether we can make this work, and we need to delay an hour or an hour and a half for there to be safe passage for DPW to be able to get out and get the roads, then we would consider having a delay.
I don't want to hog the floor if other people have questions. I do have one more, but I'll wait. Yeah, we can talk about it.
Thank you for the information, for the background. Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little. I'm sorry. We've got a fan behind us over here, so it's a little difficult to.
Understandable. So my thoughts on it, I appreciate hearing that in terms of this plan, if things were to move forward, abiding by what has been presented, that already plans would be underway to have a backup plan in case. So in terms of preparation, if it were to be a virtual learning day because of the snow, there would be plans and curriculum in place for the teachers to communicate that to the students. If that's what I'm hearing.
Correct.
So I have to be honest and candid. My thoughts are, I'm not fully opposed to this. I say that because I do see some benefits to still having the remote learning experience, even on a snow day. And I will preface that I totally understand and respect what all of my colleagues are saying, and I certainly appreciate the nostalgia of thinking back when I was a child in the snow days. Of, ooh, yes. But unfortunately, the nostalgia that I experience and many of us do from our childhood is not comparable to what our kids now are experiencing. And even now I'm thinking with a snow day, if they were to have one, not everyone has the opportunity to go outside and play in the snow. What if someone lives in an apartment complex or a condo? Or let's say they do go outside and play in the snow, but then their peers want to come over and join them. No, can't come over. Put your mask on. And and they take away from the experience. I'm not saying that would happen to all households, but for some. And then I'm also thinking for some young people where school, the continuity of school, the routine, the predictability is their saving grace. And on snow days where otherwise they may not have anything structured to do during the day, this may give them something something that's predictable and something structured, even if it is for 3 hours or 4 hours. And from what I heard you say, that if it were to be a virtual learning day on a snow day, it's not like they would be in school all day. It would be a partial day. So they still would have other opportunities to do other things. So I just had to have full disclosure in terms of where my stance is, that I'm not fully opposed to this. I see the reasons behind this. I do appreciate hearing how you are receptive to what has been said, and also that if there were, and from hearing correctly, that there's a possibility to consider maybe a cap. So I appreciate the discussion. I just had to share where my thoughts are with it. But I don't see it as a total bad to support what has been proposed.
Well, and also, Lauren, if I could just add, please understand that as Tom mentioned, we don't have a horse in this race. Tom and I work year-round and so forth. I would just point out that oftentimes, I'm just going to throw this out there, oftentimes we hear criticism if we go too far into June and it gets warm in buildings and other cases. And so this is, again, just there's no good answer to this and there's no right answer on any of this. That's kind of what we've been dealing with for the last 9 months. There is no good right answer in a lot of these situations. It's a trade-off. And this is a trade-off that allows us to get out of the school year at the date we've set versus prolonging it further.
We used to, just for clarification, we used to have pretty consistently like a 4-day-a-year snow days were consistent. And we have been all over the place for the past 7 years. I mean, we've gone from 0 to 9. I mean, it's been all over the place with this. So that's also just informationally, right now the last day of school is June 15th. So just, and just to remember, that's June 15th with the later start day. So that's 177 days in session, just so we're clear. So there can't be any forgiven days this year. Anything that is canceled must be made up.
Can you give us, without committing, more specific times of when elementary school, middle school, and high school would end under this plan?
Paul, go ahead.
Just be loud. That's not a microphone. It's just.
It's not a microphone?
Just speak up.
Okay.
While we have plenty of room to adjust our plans, the current thinking for right now at secondary level, should we go to this plan, would be to maintain the schedule that we have with high schools essentially from 7:30 a.m. until 1. We do have, as you likely know, under hybrid, we have afternoon sessions where we're supporting our students who are at home. We would forego those afternoon sessions. Likewise, in the middle school, from 8 a.m. until 1:30. At the elementary, where it is a little bit more complicated, we're looking at breaking the students into 2 to 3 groups depending on grade levels. We would probably opt for a half-hour later start. That's in our current plan. That allows for the schools to have kind of a half-an-hour synchronization meeting to make sure they've got all the pieces covered, everything in place, get ready for whatever cross-communication, just in case, Andy would make the call the evening prior, but you want to make sure that all your players are on the same page. We would plan for the start to the day likely to be a large group kind of community meeting where teachers could do their greeting and all of that, but also so that they could attend to any of the logistics of the day. Because the intent would be to break the students down into at least 2 smaller groups for the purposes of being able to actually have that small group instruction with our younger learners, 24 first graders on at once or 20 even, is a lot more challenging than it is for 29th graders. So we break them into those smaller groups, which would allow for the classroom teacher to meet with them, and then service providers, our ESOL teachers, our special educators, our reading interventionists and such, to have opportunities to meet with the pockets of kids that are not in that first session, and then have a lunch period, and then flip-flop. Then with the potential, the only question would be, do we hold them for an afternoon sort of end of day collective group or not? But somewhere around 1 p.m., 1:15 at the latest, the elementary day in earnest would be over, but from the student lens, they would only be on for portions of that day. So that's the general thinking right now. We do have meetings scheduled with a variety of groups to refine that plan before it becomes finalized.
That'll include our elementary leadership this week, and in addition, I'm looking to call a meeting with our scheduling committee that we've worked with in partnership with our union before we come to it. But that's kind of like a sneak peek of some of the thinking.
Now, that could be, and just to recall, like at the high school, middle school level where we're doing streaming with 2.0, that wouldn't necessarily be all that time straight in. It could be synchronous work and asynchronous work with that. Which also could be looked at as we launch that further into synchronous and the asynchronous side. So it's a rough draft right now.
There is simplicity to maintaining the time schedule, but we would ask the teachers in that setting with an emergency, think flexibly about how you might use your group time at the secondary levels.
From a high school perspective. Not to put you on the spot, though.
But I think like the first snow day or two, like everyone's excited normally, but the general feeling I felt like over the years is that students in general don't like snow days like being up and really extending into June. More people are want to get out of school and into summer vacation earlier than have like a bunch throughout the year. So like the first two are fine, but then like snow days, people don't look at those pretty favorably.
Yeah, I agree with Rochelle. I haven't really had the opportunity to talk with a lot of my peers about this so far. I've talked to a few friends about it. And I think when you first hear that snow days are over, it's kind of sad. But when you think about it, it definitely does make sense with the lack of class time that we've had this year. But I do think, this is really can't be controlled, but I just don't know how enthusiastic students will be reporting to online classes when they wanted a snow day. There's not really anything you can do about that, but I do think that that could be a potential issue. It's like a lack of participation on those days. But again, there's really not a way to control that.
Are there other questions or thoughts that folks want to share, and then we can make a motion? All right. And to just use your mic. Thank you. It's okay.
So my thought is, given all of the kind of feedback, including the students, is there any way, I mean, I don't know how, if we were to vote on this as is, if everyone would feel comfortable. So I don't know if there's a way to amend this somehow and maybe say 2 snow days and then the rest is remote or something of that nature, and not deciding based on like kind of 2 days and then the rest is remote.
Yeah, you could do that without even amending it, because it just says that you'll allow that. And so if there's a direction from the board that way, if we communicated that out, that would be fine. In all honesty, the last day of school, June 15th, is a Tuesday. So I really wouldn't go any more than 3 days. But however you want to do it, that's understandable. And we could just operate that way. Because this just allows us to declare some days that way.
Other questions? We don't yet have a motion, so we can go ahead. That would help, because I feel like we all want the same thing, just for the kids and the teachers also to have the experience of a little bit of time like that. It's just fun and necessary. But in order to get the hours in, we almost have to do that because the delay piece is just too complicated. So I think amending it solves that problem, because it's just the either or part that I was struggling with. Other comments or questions? Jason?
Yeah, I think based on the discussion, my concerns were about the negative penalties that could have arisen from from taking this kind of perspective, this policy. But I think, keeping the schedule in line and the continuity across the school year, combined with the leniency of the state on counting that participation, I think ultimately it's better to move forward and in the context of the school year. And so in the course of the discussion, my mind has been changed.
Anyone else? Well, I'll share how I've been thinking. I think that families prefer predictability, and unfortunately, there is no predictability in 2020, basically at all, in any aspect of our lives. And so we just are not going to be able to provide predictability in the schools either. We're doing everything we can to provide a predictable schedule, but we know that that's just not going to be possible in the way that we want it to be. And so just a shout out to all the families that are rolling with the changes and all of the staff members who are doing that. And I know that we're not even close to being done with making changes this year. So given the fact that we can't really provide predictability, I go back to what my colleague Mark said. Like, this is about providing an education for our students. And I think about the amount of time that's already been lost this year, the kind of in and out aspect of it, even thinking about AP classes, when those AP exams are. You add a day in June, that's a day that they didn't have in preparation for an AP exam. Thinking back to when I had my kids in school and was a working parent and two working parent household. I mean, snow days are hard. It may be nostalgic for some people, but it's hard for a lot of families. But either way, in this situation, the kids are not going into the building, right? We're talking about a day when the kids are not going into the building. So can we have them learn that day? We should be able to have them learn on those days, because everybody hopefully is set up to be learning from home, because we've been doing that already. So those are my thoughts. I think I'm looking for a motion which would allow the designation of snow days as remote learning days for this year, consistent with the State Department of Education's guidance, and with the recommendation that up to 2 days be given as actual snow days. So does somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
Before you make that motion, can I clarify that the first 2 days?
The first, yes, up to the first 2 days.
So the first 2 days would be snow days.
Yep, the first 2 days would be snow days. After that, remote learning.
So moved.
Motion by Ari Steinberg, seconded by Liz Wilcox. Thank you. Is there further discussion? If not, I will try your minds. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you for that robust conversation. Moving on to staff communications and reports, and we have the superintendent's report.
Thanks. I do have, one announcement before any discussion. I want to congratulate Susie Sinatro, who has been the curriculum specialist at Whiting Lane and is just a tremendous educator and powerhouse. And last week we named Susie as the new principal for RLE, for our remote learning, which will allow Carrie Jones, who I want to publicly thank, who did so much work to get the program off the ground. It allows her to return to her role as Director of Elementary Education in the district, which is a sorely needed position for us. So, this was announced and people got the opportunity to meet with Susie last week, and she's getting involved right away and working with Tim Kessler as our remote learning. And in the beginning of December, we'll have a board presentation here from the leadership of remote learning at all levels to go through where we are how it's going so far, what we've learned and what's shifted during that time. So congratulations to Susan. I do think it's appropriate to address, I sent home a communication at the end of last week, and this is a time when things change daily. My goals haven't shifted. The State Department of Public Health has become clear in their stance that, I guess the way we'd say it is that at the beginning of a pandemic, and Scott Gottlieb said this, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, that we expected the pandemic to operate as influenza pandemics have, where the school has been the seeds for the community and for community spread. And that this hasn't operated like this this year. We're learning more and more about COVID and Corona and some of the things that have been put in place. You look at it and think, is that really appropriate, that guidance anymore with what we know? And so it's kind of this shift is, actually, when we look at the spectrum of how do we keep our communities safe and what do we close, instead of first, school should be last. And I completely agree. My own thinking, I've had some people question, I thought you took this seriously. I take this exceptionally seriously. And I look at our numbers every day. And I've thanked Andy before, but the work of Andy and our principals, every day you get those notices about positive cases in the schools. Now, I'd remind people that we're talking about a 12,000 person group of employees and students out of really the 60,000 in West Hartford. If there are cases in the community, there will be cases in the school. And one of the reasons contact tracing is so important is not just so that we can isolate and quarantine people appropriately, but it's that we know what is the spread. And schools just have not been the spread. And I can tell you some of the things, and I don't want to sound judgmental or preachy as I get accused of. We had cases a week to 10 days after Halloween, and the contact tracing told us where those came from, and it wasn't school. Right now, we have pretty much massive and close to uncontrolled spread in West Hartford. I mean, we had 60 positive cases this weekend. Our numbers keep going up. We're in orange as far as the schools are concerned, red as far as the community is concerned. We're going to be moving to red. There are districts that have announced that they are going fully remote. Some for the week after Thanksgiving. Some have announced that they're going from now through Martin Luther King Day. Part of the argument for that is to give parents knowledge that this is what's going to happen. We've, in consultation with the Department of Public Health, Andy was on the phone this morning with state epidemiologist Matthew Carter. I was on a phone call with all the area superintendents and representatives from the Department of Public Health. There's another call Friday morning that we're going to be on. The intention and the strive has been to be in school and keep kids in school as much as we can. And we're not seeing spread within school, though we have cases. And though when you get, well, there were 2 cases in this grade in the same place, we can't say they were siblings or they were, we can't go through that with people because of privacy. And there is an element of trust where we've done the contact tracing, as has the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, and this was not a school spread. It doesn't mean it's impossible. And that's something we would look for is, are you seeing a nexus in a building that is completely unexplained? And if so, do you have to look at that building? But to your point, Amanda, which was very well taken, if more and more districts go out and we have teachers that go on leave because their children, they live in that town, and then we have teachers that are in quarantine, and we have staff members from principals across, there could be a time where we just can't keep our buildings open safely. And it's not safe because of the pandemic spread. It's that we don't have the number of adults in the building to maintain and to really operate school, and that really educationally children would be better off in a remote learning environment. So those are the things that we weigh. Whether the governor at some point decides, because of hospitalization rates, that the entire state would be in remote, I don't know if that's going to happen. It doesn't seem like from discussions, but our hospitalization rate has tended to double every 2 weeks. And if that happens over the next 2 weeks, we're in a crisis situation. Rick Ledwith, myself, communicated with our staff about travel over Thanksgiving and all that means for us. Because if somebody travels, that means they're out and they're in quarantine under the state rules until negative tests come back, which the week after Thanksgiving is going to be a difficult week in terms of just our numbers. Every day is immensely difficult when you get positive cases come in and you have to do the contact tracing. And I just want to say again, I am so thankful for the work of Andy, our principals, and our West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, because we have not closed one school for one day yet. And people will say, why is that? We prioritize education. We will do everything we can to keep our schools open. But just so we're all aware, it's not getting any easier as time goes by. And again, it's unfortunate because I don't believe we will need to close because they're spreading the schools. We might have such numbers that it's just a reality at some point, but it's not what I'm thinking, and it's not what I'm not saying this as a warning like, hey, everybody, we're going to close. I wanted to send it out to the staff, and I wanted to send it out to families so that everybody's clear. You're not getting an email from me saying, hey, we're closing for 2 weeks at this point, because that's not our thinking. And again, it's because we're following the Department of Public Health, which we have tried to do from the beginning of this crisis. And while it does feel, and I agree with you, Mark, that I don't see the light right around the corner, but there is light out there, which is why, Ari and I were talking about it. It's there. If we can make the next 2 months, if we can hunker down and we can sacrifice, there is hope out there. There are vaccines and treatments out there. But the numbers right now, and based on what I saw from Halloween after warning, I will say I'm not that optimistic about Thanksgiving. Not to be a pessimist, but that's where we are. So hopefully families will be careful this holiday season. So happy to answer some questions on that.
Mark?
I guess I wasn't even thinking of this thought, but, the light at the end of the tunnel for me is that the vaccines are finally here. And are we going to wait on the governor's recommendations on who and how that happens and who he allows in schools with or without that vaccine? Or is it going to be a policy set here for vaccines?
Vaccines, we won't be able to set the policy. Of course, we would most likely be a source of getting something off the ground with that. From everything I've seen, you would see those most at risk. Your first responders, and then in early phases, maybe early on, you see those work in schools, and that's true.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is the policy for students or families that choose not to get the vaccine, where's that policy going to come from?
It's actually state right now, but it was developed introduced last year, and I would be surprised if we weren't introducing legislation again this year. So we'll see how that goes. I don't have the power. If somebody says it's for religious grounds, I don't have the power to force them.
Ari?
I actually just want to thank you because every day I see a notification on my phone of another district that has decided to close, and some until the middle of January, making a decision in November until the middle of January. And, you know, you and I have spoken, and in all honesty, I really feel like for our town and our children, the safest place they can be between school hours is at school, because you're doing everything in your power with your staff and everyone to take the safety precautions that are necessary to prevent spread, and I don't think that that's being followed as much within the community. So I would much rather have my son sitting in classes than hanging out, well, he wouldn't, but hanging out with friends, you know, recreationally. So I applaud you for kind of standing firm on that decision. So thank you.
Questions or comments? Amanda?
Excuse me. So we've reached the end of quarter one, and thank you to the teachers who have gotten us there and are transitioning to hybrid 2.0 and also managing conferences. Thank you to the coaches who got us through a season, which is incredible for the kids on so many levels.
Man, we can't hear you. No, that's not gonna help.
Other questions or comments? Only because Amanda mentioned sports, do you want to just announce what the CIAC announced today?
Yes, I meant to do that. So, sports won't begin until mid-January, and that means that official practice won't begin until mid-January. Conditioning, Andy, Jason and I haven't had that opportunity to discuss that with local health officials. There's a part of me that it means to just say we're not doing conditioning, we're not doing anything And there's no such thing as captain practice, those don't exist. But if coaches want a group to condition together, like happened during the summer, outdoors, that's something that we can see that again wouldn't be mandatory. We're not saying it's going to happen, it's saying we need to have further discussion about what does it look like. We don't want our kids to not be doing anything physical. And that's a piece of our thought process. But again, in some ways, the virus is going to decide that, and its spread as we go forward in the coming weeks.
Presentation on family-school partnership and the service of equity. And I will turn it over to Dr. Rosita Haskins and Dr. Scott Bradford.
Good evening, everyone. As always, we appreciate the opportunity to share with the community our district's equity work. This evening, we will focus on family-school partnership. Dr. Scott Bradford and I are very pleased to have joined with us this evening in person, our parent partner, Mr. Mike Keel, and by speakerphone, parent partner, Mrs. Tricia Pitter. We appreciate both of your patience listening in on the snow day discussion. It's an important discussion. We know it's a long day for you, and I know that Mike has to leave soon, so I owe you a cup of coffee or tea. But we are excited to hear from both of you this evening, and I am going to speak with brevity so that we can hear your voices. We're going to talk about the principles of family-school partnership and hear your reflections, and then we'll close out with, what are the efforts? What have we learned? What strengths and what are some areas of growth? And then we'll open the floor to board members for a question and discussion. But essentially, what is family-school partnership? And it is the multitude of ways that families, caring adults at home and in school, support students in their learning and healthy development.
But the other piece of family engagement and family partnership is that we understand that we come at the work with strengths on both sides of the equation, and also need to build capacity on both sides, that families have strengths that we want to make sure that we capture, as do our staff, our educators, but that both sides need to really help each other to grow so that they can work together. There is a framework that we're looking at through Dr. Karen Mapp, which allows us to understand that when we build positive relationships and trust, when we build those capacities, we ultimately don't do just that we end up with not just strong relationships, but we actually build student achievement. So there are 5 principles that we're really looking at in terms of our strategies and working with families. The first, we look at how we provide welcoming school environments and how we reduce and identify barriers to those families, how we build positive communication regarding student behavior and achievement for families, how we, the partnerships are represented through active two-way communication, utilizing a variety of mediums. And then we're really going to focus tonight, we have examples of where communications allow the identification of experiences that increase dialogue opportunities, and the opportunities for families to be involved in influence planning and policy, utilizing their expertise, are really captured in our work.
So, as every year we report regularly on our family-school partnership, following those principles. So for those who are new to the board or new to following our family-school partnership, this is just another installment. We bring this image out in every presentation, in every professional learning setting, to remind ourselves and to inform the community that we keep equity in the center of everything that we do in service to children. And family partnership is essentially the relationship between the family and schools, where families and school representatives work in partnership to best improve student outcomes. So Ms. Pitter and Mr. Keel are here tonight to share their reflections and to showcase some of the ways and practices that family partnership has been evidenced and recommendations for continuous growth. While we see strengths and needs in all schools, tonight we want to highlight Aiken and the district's work. We know that Aiken School Principal Shannon Milzinski, she's watching from home due to the executive orders, and Mrs. Pitter and Mr. Keel, they represent the bookends of the pre-K through 5 elementary level spectrum at Aiken. And so now I'm just going to mute myself and put Ms. Pitter on speakerphone so that you can hear her in real time. Can you hear me, Tricia?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. You'll just have to project.
Okay. Good evening, board members. Again, my name is Tricia Pitter, and I am the parent of a 5th grade remote learner. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and our West Hartford families about my experience with parents' engagement, Aiken's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Parent Committee, our parent partnership successes, and gaps that should be addressed. I want to acknowledge that these months have been very difficult for so many families, including mine, with the dire continuation of COVID-19, the awakening or reawakening of racial and social injustice, and the change to our children's learning environment to hybrid, remote, or back to full-time in school has truly shifted our community to react, engage, and activate. Over the past couple of months, we have seen an increase in parent engagement throughout the West Hartford School District and the individual school level. And I am one of those parents that have been engaged in both. At the district level, I was involved in the Elementary Social Emotional Impacts Committee that provided recommendations that guided our district SEL efforts for the reopening of schools. Through a racial equity lens, I provided input on how we can support and equip our students in building relationships and school connectedness that would allow them to be thriving and resilient in a safe and conducive learning environment. As part of the One Community, 1 Year campaign, I worked with Dr. Rosina Haskins and Aiken's principal Shannon Milzinski on campaign messaging to invite community participation and even going as far as to building relationships with UConn Health Medical and Dental Student Associations on creating a video on how our students can keep themselves safe during COVID-19 and be active allies to their peers. I'm currently involved in a work group committee of Black, Indigenous, and people of color that we refer to as BIPOC parents, reviewing, evaluating, discussing, and providing feedback on the elementary school curriculum, looking at every single lesson through an anti-racism and equity lens approach. I'm also active on the West Hartford District EDI Parent Community Group with several other core parent leaders. Yukio, Gigi, Nakia, Rebecca, and Kathy. We work together to ensure our district is authentically anti-racist by working with leaders and community stakeholders to look at solutions from a school need and policy perspective for teachers, families, and students. Now, at the school level, my daughter, even though my daughter is a remote learner, her home school is always Aiken Elementary. I started an EDI parent-led committee that currently involves parent leaders Amy Rader, Abaya Rule, Sarah Williams, Jeremiah Shockley, Patty Altieri, Lyndon Pitter, Jen Johnson, and our principal Shannon Milzinski. The Aiken EDI mission is to create an equitable, inclusive, and active anti-racist environment for our students, parents, teachers, and staff. We believe diversity is essential for students to thrive in an environment where inclusion, equity, anti-racism, and a sense of belonging are at the heart of our efforts. We also create opportunities for partnerships with community-based organizations who can be a source of support for Aiken. Our EDI committee's tagline or hashtag is Project Togetherness. And this is intentional because this work cannot be done in silos. We need the involvement and engagement and partnership of our school community, whether it's through our EDI parent committee, responding to surveys, or attending an Aiken EDI event. We all play a fundamental part in advancing our EDI mission. We use data received from our Aiken community to formulate programs and strategies in addressing the needs of our family for the school year. For instance, the Aiken EDI Speaker Series. This series features distinguished scholars, activists, and experts to speak on topics most concerning Aiken. The goal is to inspire and ignite candid and sometimes difficult dialogues around diversity, inclusion, equity, race, and racism. In October, we featured speaker Sharnae Gordon. She's the founder of the Here We Read blog, and she presented on how to talk to kids about race and tough topics. Tomorrow, November 18th, in partnership with the Center for the Treatment of Developmental Trauma Disorders at UConn Health, the Urban League of Greater Hartford, and hopefully Fed, we will host a virtual event focused on healing and wellness within ourselves, our family, and our community during these unprecedented times. We've started to create school-to-school alliances with other West Hartford EDI groups to broaden parent engagement, including shared resources and partnership initiatives. In the remaining school year months, we hope to increase our family engagement by finding opportunities for students, parents, and families to connect, and look for ways to empower parents by offering training around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and advocacy, creating affinity and alliance groups, and fun and inclusive family events. So I know I mentioned a lot, but to make significant changes and move towards an anti-racist community, it's a lifelong commitment. The West Hartford School District should truly enact a parent engagement partnership policy. This policy should reflect a systemic, integrated, and sustainable approach to engagement and influencing policies and practices throughout the district. While the district has made tremendous progress in advancing parent engagement and partnership through the work of the Department of Equity Advancement, much more needs to be done. Again, to continue strengthening our partnerships, the district must be fully engaged and recognize that to eradicate racism, the inequity is a shared responsibility for all and not a subset. Be fully transparent in steps you are taking to be anti-racist at the leadership level, district level, and policy level. In wake of social and anti-racism unrest, we are reminded that schools are a reflection of our society. Therefore, it is important that the district strengthens its parent engagement and partnership and uses data analytic solutions to look for signs of systemic equity in our schools' culture, trends, practices, and policies. The district should collect data in identifying disparities in remote learning during COVID-19. This is actually important now since the majority of remote learners represent BIPOC families. The data should be used to uncover gaps and address the racial and ethnic disparities that exist in home learning environments that makes participation and success for online learners more difficult. This is the first step in developing a plan towards sustainable and tangible solutions in reducing and eliminating the achievement gap. Furthermore, I want to make clear that remote learning was not a choice for most families, but a decision made around health, safety, and the livelihood of their loved ones. Before closing my talk, I would like to commend the Department of Equity and Advancement in finding practical ways to engage BIPOC parents and being aware that our voices matter. Dr. Haskins especially has been a beacon of support that was needed during these most difficult times for so many families. Thank you so much for your resiliency and dedication to our community, especially our children. I want to thank our fearless principal, Shannon Medinsky, for her leadership, solidarity, and allegiance as a true partner in the EDI work we're doing at Aiken. I want to thank the West Hartford Board of Ed, especially Amanda and Deb, for your commitment in working with the West Hartford District EDI parent group to address issues surrounding racial inequity throughout our district. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you all, and I'm so happy that I was able to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petter. Appreciate that. I'm going to suspend my commentary, except to say we are so grateful for your support and your leadership in this work. And I'm just going to turn it over to Mike Keogh.
Hi all, thank you for having me here today. My name is Mike Keogh. I am wearing two hats today. I am a parent of a pre-K student at Aiken, as well as the founder of I Am Not a Virus. My son is at Aiken, and like many of you, I had troubles transitioning to remote learning. And as parents of color, I had the difficult task of explaining to him that what racism was last year. There were incidents against Asian Americans that happened locally in West Hartford, Simsbury, Glastonbury, as well as Bloomfield. So I decided to create a portrait campaign called I Am Not a Virus that showcased what we loved about ourselves and what we should celebrate ourselves. During this project, we created intersectionality, or not created intersectionality, but we used intersectionality to create a message that an attack against a BIPOC person was an attack against your neighbors. This messaging worked really well. And we empower students to creatively engage in practices around equity, justice, mental wellness through art, storytelling, and professional development as socially responsible individuals to their communities. We can go to the next slide. Christina? Currently, there's been a lot of corporations. Is this the slide I'm on? Yep. So my team is made of mostly college students. Our students have worked alongside professionals in their field of study, have received job offers, and created networks much larger than themselves. And these are college students. We have interviewed Attorney General Tong, the first American elected judge, Christy Yang, members, producers of Nightline, international artist Red Hong Yi, who is on 2 top 10 lists of artists to know in both Asia and Australia, and she's done work with Adele. So we've been able to grow these networks. We've worked with state commissions at companies such as Ogilvy Health. Ogilvy, the disruption company, Admirasia, Latino Way have reached out to work with us. We have partnered with institutions around the country to highlight these stories of BIPOC communities, especially Asian Americans right now during this difficult time. We've worked on what solidarity looks like in a panel for Asian and Black solidarity, which had about 35,000 plays the last time I checked, and about 6,000 people showed up online that day for that conversation. We worked with corporations. We've created networks with museums as well as artists to highlight this. So artists that we're working with include people that are currently on Broadway and off-Broadway, as well as playwrights, national artists from around the country to provide conversations about BIPOC experiences in a manner where anyone could really enter this conversation through art and through food. I'm sorry, can you go back one slide? That coloring book right there is produced by Admirasia. It is a K-12 coloring book featuring Asian American pioneers with educators in mind. We've created this resource that highlights Asian Americans throughout U.S. history. So any educator from the K-12 curriculum, when they're talking about suffrage, they can include Mabel Pin Hua Lee, or they could add a Vietnamese American astronaut, so our children can feel reflected in the curriculum. I know for my son, who is 4 years old, when he saw a rice cooker with his teacher, Jill Winkler, shared this book with a rice cooker in it, his eyes lit up, and he was so excited to help me with dinner that night. And I think that's extremely important to know, and I think this is something parents of color definitely need, as well as everyone. This book is published. Jason Chang has generously written our foreword for it. And every copy purchased provides a free copy to an educator, as well as helps build our history as colorful curriculum. So these are things that we have done so far. We've created a BIPOC curriculum with local farmers in the Simsbury area that can be brought into the classroom for an interdisciplinary curriculum. This is really new and exciting. It hasn't really been done this way before, to have living history, bring up conversations about race, solidarity throughout American history. We've partnered up with artists as well as playwrights and writers. So to be able to have access to these writers is extremely important, where we can get them to come in. For example, with No No Boy, the playwright could come in with the actors that perform the show and read a play to the class or act out a scene to the class. We have a podcast and blog that highlights personal experiences throughout the community. This is a part of our I Am initiative. We could do something with West Hartford, like I Am West Hartford, or I believe the term was All Our Children, is what we're talking about. But we could give our students the tool sets to actually distill information in new creative ways that engage with our communities, to build up these networks themselves. So by the time they graduate, not only do they have their own personal portfolio and creative work, but they also have mentors that they can reach out to. And this is so important for all students to see positive representation of BIPOC creators, right? So we're not stuck in a role where we just have to be one or two things. We have partnerships with museums that have offered to host student galleries as well as window displays from Connecticut, from West Hartford students, if that was the case. This would be a great way to get parents that aren't BIPOC to come into these spaces and learn about these histories, as well as celebrate these stories. We've created a mental health activity book for Asian Americans with the Asian American Studies Institute at UConn. We are working with queer families of color that it's being done with, oh, there's a typo there. With the queer families of color is being done with Concerned Parents of Color of West Hartford, as well as another organization in Indiana. This is our History is Colorful curriculum. We have the raw material to about 7 different farmers that represent different countries and personal experiences. These conversations allow us to enter these larger conversations about sustainability, equity, land access, as well as what it means to walk with social justice, right? What tools can you use to tell these stories and to learn about these histories? I'm imagining that this could lead to something larger like a community garden that again invites parents from West Hartford to come into the space, as well as promote an art display. So we could have an outdoor art display with students, right? So it breaks down the silos between community and school and brings it together to be anti-racist. And yep, so this work right now, we have a lot of interest nationally on this, and we also have a lot of local supporters as well. So it's really new, it's exciting, it's engaging, and I could see a documentary being made about West Hartford with this through nonprofits such as Not in Our Town, because there are so many communities looking to do this right now. This allows students to understand cross-solidarity and equity. So it allows us to see our places within history, connect stories around common themes, and create movements larger than ourselves. And I think this is so important right now. This cultivates coalition building, which allows students to see themselves as active members of their community, and what that means to build a better town. It opens the door for like student-led farmer markets, art galleries, participation outside the classroom setting. It also builds professional networks. I can tell you that my team has been offered job opportunities while they are still in their master programs. They've also been able to connect with larger organizations that are doing the work that they're currently doing, and there's eyes on them. So imagine if this happens for a high school student in West Hartford. The doors just blow open. Early empowerment. This is something that's important to me as the father of 2 young boys that are Asian American. I want them to see themselves, as well as students of color from all different walks of life. We have BIPOC stories, so we have stories from indigenous communities. We have stories from Latin communities, Black communities. I think it's so important for our children to see themselves reflected in these positive reinforcement, to see that they could be educators, that they can be actors, artists, any different walk that they may choose. This leads to mentorship, it leads to internships, you know? And early empowerment. Oh, did I do that already? Mm-hmm. I think, I really think it's important for our students to see themselves as agents of change and what that means in this diversified landscape. Our students have a podcast where they can interview local stories from West Hartford of family members or from local businesses. It creates a community. It breaks down the role of the school. It expands their personal network as well as allow them to witness other experiences that are happening around them. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Mike, thank you. Thank you for your collaboration, your partnership. So, this is an example of opportunities for us that are right here in our own backyard. It's been such an enriching, rewarding experience working with Mike. Mike is a member of our high school social justice and social emotional learning parent curriculum work group. And so we're always thinking about creative ways to enhance the teaching and learning experience and just show students, give them opportunities to see themselves in the context of teaching and learning. And so Mike is just, his work and his contributions have been a great example, of how family and school partnerships really matter. He's bringing in funds of knowledge and a plethora of resources into our schools, and we're just so grateful and glad that we had the opportunity to hear from you, and it won't be the last.
Thank you. Can I say one thing I forgot to mention? Scott, Rosina, Jocelyn, and the parents of the SEL group have been amazing, tremendous supporters, and they really, really care about our children, and it makes me feel really included within this school district. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I have to run because my babysitter is about to leave.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
Yep. And so, the next couple of slides really just essentially summarizes our strengths, and it reiterates the areas of growth that are needed as Ms. Pitter so succinctly outlined as recommendations for those two key principles that we were discussing this evening. We do have, intersections of good practice and developing practice, but we're also keenly aware that it's not enough. And so where we see strengths in active partnership, we recognize the work that we still have ahead of us. And so where we see improvement in outreach and inclusion of communities of color and partnership linked to learning, we understand the need for assessment that is transparent and inclusive of underrepresented families. Positive feedback about how this translates back to students is indicated, but we know we need to do more to offer opportunities to extend conversations about race and equity and diversity and inclusion and anti-racism at home, not just in school. And here where we show effort to partner with families in several areas of educational programming and decision-making, we know that we have to continue to identify other areas and reach out to more parents and more parents of color in planning and decision-making. So here's our road ahead. There are activities and lines of effort currently in progress. But before I unpack, one of the major efforts we heard tonight, the school board policy development, I'm going to let Scott speak to accountability, voice, and the Family School Partnership Network.
So among the areas in which we're building our family partnerships and really learning from one another and doing the work together, stretching our resources and learning so much from the fact that we have different stakeholders who are helping us to look at our work, is one of our first efforts. Is we're working through our Equity and Diversity Council on accountability measures for equity, identifying metrics that would help us to know where it is that we are meeting our goals and holding ourselves to the vision that we've set around what it means to be an equitable organization and what it means in our schools to achieve true equity. And so identifying specific kinds of metrics and then being able to go and begin to take a snapshot of where we are right now that would inform deeper work that we can do, a deeper dive toward understanding where it is that we're meeting those goals and where we may be falling short, always with the goal and effort toward continuous improvement. Part of that work, just to let you know where these partnerships build, is that there is an idea around student voice and including student and family voice in not only opportunities for students, as Mike spoke about, where students may be able to express what it means to be part of an identity group and what their lived experience is, both as a creative outlet for themselves, but also for their peers to learn about experiences, what they may not see in their classmates and how their lived experiences are different from their own. So there's opportunities for students to learn from one another, but then also opportunities for us to utilize that information that comes back. Students who record or write about their experiences in this community, what it's like to have been a student of color, for example, in West Hartford, that video or that writing may come back as a part of what we look at in terms of our own review of where we are right now. It may also be folded back into our professional development efforts. staff being able to hear student voice, family voice, is a very powerful part of the work. So the student voices piece, the family voices piece, we're trying to build lanes for students and families to inform us and one another about where it is that we need to do work, but also places for students to be able to articulate their experience in ways that may be outside of sort of traditional assessment, and ways they can express their experiences here in the schools. The family partnership, I'm sorry. The Family School Partnership Network, part of what we've learned in our work with families has come from our work around feedback in the work toward building out our social and emotional and social justice curricula. But what we've also discovered is that there are a variety of family and community organizations out in the West Hartford community, all striving for similar efforts around equity, and that we really, if we're going to do our work well, that we want to pull together these different groups under one roof and be able to work together to be able to identify opportunities for students and for families, and to be able to communicate together, share resources together. And so we're building a network that includes groups like I Am Not a Virus, groups like EDI, and all of the various family groups and partner community groups who serve these same aims. But for us to do this well, we really need to make sure we're intentional in bringing these groups together and creating a forum where we can together identify some common goals and do that work more intentionally. So within the next month, we're going to be bringing those groups to the table to be able to build some of those goals and to be able to establish some common efforts in a very sort of directed way.
So we have a plan and a timeline for policy development around educational equity and anti-racism. We have formed EDC work groups to focus on these areas. Our work started, for policy development in the summer, probably in the late spring, and really gained a lot of traction over the summer because we wanted to be strategic and intentional around it. And so we have been discussing it a lot. And so we have a statement of assurance that the board has considered the importance of racial equity. We have a working definition of equity and anti-racism, and we have a vision for educational equity and anti-racism that we believe will drive all the pieces of our work. Where we are right now, we formed the EDC work groups. Last week, we held a very short combined group meeting with our 3 parent work groups working on the SEL and SJ curricula, just to announce the Family School Partnership Network, which will convene next month in December. We will send out district-wide communication to all family members and families and stakeholder groups about this work and going forward. And in December, we'll look to convene all of those groups, and we'll review our framework for equity and anti-racism policy development. And again, make sure that we leave no stones unturned in terms of our outreach and our communication. And there will be a process for community input. I don't imagine it being a huge group of people, but we will have systems and mechanisms and vehicles for the public to give public input and recommendations. And so in January, our policy work group, we aim to have a draft policy statement for the board to review. And then we will go from there in the remainder of the spring, hoping to adopt a policy at the end of the school year or in the beginning of next school year. And so in this work, we channel our champions for children, like the late Rita Pearson, ways to better serve our students. And as Tricia Pitter said, all students, not subsets of students. Our reckoning over racial inequity requires a significant shift in our conversations, we do know that, and in our attitudes about equity and anti-racism. So our position is to stand shoulder to shoulder with communities calling to challenge status quo and to champion for all of our children. And I apologize if this felt or seemed rushed, but it will stay on our agenda. We will keep the conversations energized and going. And we'll open the floor now at this time for questions and discussion. And Ms. Pitter is still with us.
Thank you. I'm sure we have some questions and discussion. Who would like to go first? Amanda?
Yes, Ms. Pitter, they're asking if you can make your comments available, and so if you want to send those to me again, or is that okay?
Oh, sure.
And I will do the same.
Yeah. I'm so sorry I can't hear anyone in the background.
Okay.
We know that you've been doing a lot of work on putting the framework together, and it's so helpful to see how you laid it out. Because it seems really clear, and there's a lot of opportunity for input and engagement. So I'm excited to be part of that as we go.
Other comments or questions? Jason?
Okay, so first, thank you for sharing this amazing work. I know from looking at other school districts who adopt new curriculum that and engage in community development often do so because of a prior organized community that is lobbying the district to change its policy. And what's about this district is that the initiative has come from within the district to adopt this. What that means, though, for the district is that you have become the catalyst for building that connective tissue of the community and bringing these pathways for participation into the district and providing that access and encouragement and resources, and that is that's remarkable. Really applaud you, everyone, for the vision of seeing through that problem and working on the application of those concepts. And so there's kind of two things. The first one is recognizing that set of innovation that you've had to do. I'm curious about how you see the integration into the curriculum from the generation of new ideas through and the involvement of the community, and then how do those things enter into the classroom? I'm trying to think of the different ways that that parts of the curriculum may overlap with existing curriculum, and I can anticipate a kind of need to evaluate how much can be incorporated and where. And so I'm curious about your process and thinking about that and how to bring teachers along in that process, and how I know you've talked in the past about change agents and change leaders, and so this line of questioning comes from my excitement about what you're doing and trying to think through how those things go forward. And so in light of that, I was reflecting on what you had said in the, I think it was the October 20th meeting, where you stated, you explained the equity statement that your office had put together. And then I asked what could the board do, and you said to adopt that as a guiding principle. So I'd like to have the board consider a motion to adopt that language as guiding principles for this policy timeline that you've set forward for us, as we consider what are those things that are gonna put those ideas into action. So I guess there's two things. The one, the implementation and the curriculum integration part, and then the second is the motion to adopt.
I can speak to so there's no one way, no one single way of bringing them all together. That's why we use that visual where all of those areas intersect. We do have a formal curriculum review and revision process in which just a couple of years ago, we actually made some changes and looked at the process itself through an equity lens. And so that as we're making, changes to the curriculum, we're making it through that lens. And now we have this opportunity where we're bringing in partners and resources that enhance that and that sharpen that lens for us. So our curriculum review and revision process, I think it's every 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. We don't wait for 5 years. When we recognize or someone points out blind spots or disconnects or gaps, we address it immediately. One really great example of that would be the 4th grade Connecticut history research project, where I got a phone call, Paul probably did too, that, hey, none of the, I went to my child's exhibit and presentation, and no one reported on students or of figures of color, notable figures of color in Connecticut. And it was a curiosity to me, because I thought, it is student choice, but why wouldn't they choose, a figure of color? Well, it was because we just didn't have the primary sources accessible at their reading levels, and not even at the Connecticut Historical Society. And it certainly wasn't for lack of trying, but we worked with families who brought higher ed level materials. We said, we can't just put those in front of students, but we spent some time talking to them about reading, phonetics and Lexile levels and things like that. And those parents became like experts or very knowledgeable about that, and then helped us to cull resources, primary sources, so that students from then on out can have materials and can learn about notable figures of color right here in their own backyard. So we'll continue to do that. We always welcome those collaborations, and so we don't wait for tides to change. We try to take action and take lead.
If I could just add to that too. So, part of what we have seen, and we've just been so fortunate, you saw the energy that you see here with Mike and his group.
You haven't really seen the energy with Mike.
You just got a taste, really. But there is so much energy in our community and so much interest in working on behalf of equity. And I think part of what we have learned is that if we're smart about it and we listen and we work together, that we gain resources that we might consider. And so the example that Mike gave about BIPOC farmers, that's something we're always hungry to do, is to give kids a vision of what it means to be an adult and to see themselves in the community and see the community in the schools, right? So that's something that's not so easy to do from the seat of a teacher. They may not have those resources. They may not have those connections. And some of our neighbors may know of those that are doing work that young people may identify. And he talked about mentorship opportunities. He talked about ways in which there are authentic learning experiences that might come to our attention that we might then look at as resources. That's not to say that this is a process by which curriculum is made, but resources are discovered, and community members who may participate and support our efforts and align with those curriculum goals are really brought to our attention. And also, I'd say there's huge value in students seeing that the whole community is wrapped around them in this effort. And when they know that it's not just the educators, but it's the whole community that's putting this work together, that changes the tone in which we do this work. So there is some shifts that occur there in terms of identification of resources, but also in seeing the places in which the students may find other mentors and other connections to adult, sort of opportunities as they move out into their lives. I think there's great value to that. And we're trying to really cultivate that in a way that's thoughtful, where it's not haphazard. It's really that there is a planful way in which to do it. So it has shown us that the resources are around us if we're smart enough to go and work together to find them and identify them.
And I apologize for the sound, and Tricia's still here, and I've got parents saying, Rosina, stop looking at your phone. I'm looking at my phone because Tricia wants to know if there are any questions for her too as we wrap up.
Lorna.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Tricia, with you still being there, thank you so much for sharing your piece. Just want to comment, very much appreciate hearing this. And what I hear in terms of this effort is that it is not only just learning about different populations and learning about equity and learning about an anti-racist approach, but it's also emphasizing learning with those families and populations as well. And I think that's very important because there can be a temptation at times to learn in a silo, where I'm just going to learn and read about, but then maybe go back to my respective environment and not be exposed to different cultures and different values. And I appreciate hearing how the effort of what you're speaking about is about the learning with, is about bridging the gap and fortifying more bonds with different family members and different communities. And we certainly know that family engagement is key. And again, to state the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, and it's important to recognize that all of us are stakeholders involved in that. So thank you very much for this effort, and that it's not a one and done. We certainly know that. We've heard before, we're here today, and look forward to hearing continued efforts in this way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly a journey, it is.
Thank you. Others? Now, Jason, you had suggested that you would like to make a motion, and I think it was for the board to adopt the vision statement. Do you want to go ahead and make that motion?
I'd like the board to consider a motion to adopt the equity language shared on October 20th.
And I think, do you want to say specifically which language?
The equity statement from.
Okay. Is there a second? And then we'll have discussion.
I just have a question. Certainly would love to do that, but do we need to have this in our record here to vote on it? Or can we go let's say, I guess, or can we go from another meeting? Doesn't have to be in this packet to make that motion?
I don't think it needs to be. I'll turn to Tom and see if you have any advice on this.
Something that would not.
You can make a new motion at any time or something like that, that a statement in terms of discussion about doing the question of do you want to broach that tonight and then formally vote to do that at the next meeting? That way, if there is any feedback from anybody, they would have time to do that. So that's there's nothing against it, but I get Mark's point about, so we could put it in as an item for next week or for the next board meeting, where we put that statement in, and we can use your language to say that at the next meeting, and you're signaling tonight that that's what you'd want to do. So you could do it either way. That way just gives time for feedback if there is any. Yeah, absolutely.
you so much, and thank you. What's that?
Do we vote on the motion that he
No,
made?
we're not going to have a motion. It's
No?
just a,
Okay.
yeah. The consensus is that we would like that on the next agenda. So again, thank you to Rosina, to Scott, and to our parents, Ms. Pitter and Mr. Keough, for sharing your insights, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you and others in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all set, Tricia.
Moving to routine matters, I am looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting from November 4th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? Jason, any discussion? If not, I'll try your minds. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the November 4th board meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? And the ayes have it. Thank you. Moving to information and reports from board members from other boards and organizations. I think, Amanda, you indicated you had a report tonight? Go for it.
How we're getting our kids and families through this. So the bridge is doing a significant amount, and I just wanted to mention this not only for an update to the community, but so that we can also spread the word. So Lily and Michelle, I'm not sure how much you know, but the Bridge Family Center is the contracted youth service bureau for the town of West Hartford that helps with the schools. They also run the Family Resource Center, which is housed in Charter Oak International Academy. They also run the Teen Center, which is in Elmwood Community Center, and they do a lot of counseling. So what I wanted to talk about tonight is a few of the ways that the Bridge has been helping our families. Specifically at the Family Resource Center, they really help us fill the gap of child care as our needs change. I have a program called 123 Be With Me, which usually happens over the summertime. And what they did is they also helped us run that this fall, so that they moved that, so that it helped us not only keep the skills base for the kids, but to give that child care support for about 4 weeks of time. And that program is for 3 and 4-year-old kids who attend Charter Oak School. And from that, when that's finished, they then launched what we have as a licensed child care fee-based program called Peace Place. And there are openings for Peace Place, so if there are families in Charter Oak who have 3 and 4-year-olds who need that program and are interested, you can talk to Deb Zipkin. They also are doing a significant amount with playgroups. There's probably 24 or 25 families who have been meeting in the parks to do playgroups and singing and reading. The kids leave with a snack and with a new book. So that's not only a touchstone experience, but it's helping with the educational pieces as well. And those things are going to be continuing in various formats. The Parent Leadership Training Institute, which we talk about as a PLTI, it has been approved by state funding, so that is going to run again. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's really a leadership development program. Many of our community leaders, including Ms. Liz Wilcox here on the board, and Dr. Warren Thomas Parkinson, they're both alumni of that program. People all through town who are in leadership capacities and in the region have gone through that program. So that recruitment starts next week. The Teen Center, which is for high school students, normally runs out of Elmwood Community Center. They haven't been able to be there for obvious reasons, so they've been doing things out in Beachman Park. But as of this week, they actually are able to be back in the building for the Teen Center. And we have a capacity of about 25 teenagers, and I think last week at their first meeting recently, they had, I think it was 24 kids who were there. So it's all student-run activities, so they're interesting. The kids love it. They're doing a coat drive, which is very significant because so many of our kids need to be able to use warms, to be able to not only be outside for school purposes, but also for social purposes outside of school. If for some reason they can't hold the program at Elmwood, the service work is going to continue, and the social hour work will continue. So please spread the word among the high school students about that. They're also doing a lot of mentoring in the schools, continuing to do a lot of counseling, and I think there's some things in the works, collaborative efforts with the family resource centers and also with the counseling center in the schools to try to come up with some programs that will support our remote learning families and teachers. Just as kind of best practices for getting through that. Those things are coming together, so we'll have more to share. So big thank you to Bridge for supporting our kids, their families, and our teachers, really at all levels of development. There's a lot going on. A lot of content is available. People who need it. Telehealth is available, and the new counseling center on Hill Street. It's on the bus line, and you can go in person if you prefer.
Thank you for that report. Anyone else? All right. We have no other information and discussions. We will move over to non-staff communications and reports from our student board representatives. We'll start with Conard tonight and Rushiel.
Person aspects of it so far. I think the general sort of feeling from students is that most people are still adjusting. It hasn't even been a week yet, and I think people are still sort of finding what works best for them. In terms of the online aspect, I think teachers have done a really nice job of giving breaks during the 75 or so minute classes. I think there was initially a lot of concern about sitting in the front of the computer for a long period of time, and I think teachers have done a good job of doing about like 40 or so minutes of instruction and then having students log off and work on their own or work together in groups. In terms of the in-person aspect, I think teachers have also given enough opportunities for during the class for breaks and having a snack break at least once during the day where students can go outside and have a snack. As mentioned, also fall sports have concluded. I would also like to congratulate our Conard students for their signing days to play collegiate athletics. These events were small, but nonetheless a very important moment. And the students and their signings have been posted on Conard's social media. Within the next coming weeks, communications will be sent to parents regarding parent-teacher conferences. These will be virtual, and I think it's a great opportunity for parents to connect with teachers. Quarter one has concluded, and I would like to thank all my teachers and the administrators for the hard work and the dedication in terms of ensuring that we have a great in terms of ensuring our education. I think that it's a wonderful in terms of how much hard work that they've put into, especially in this school year. Also the announcement that semester one exams, that there won't be semester one exams, I think have relieved a lot of stress among students. I think we're already living in a lot of stressful time, and I think not having to take those, I think, removes that stress. On that note, I would like to congratulate Conard's Barbara Leonard for winning Conard's first of hopefully many College Board Opportunity Scholarships. Thank you.
So, in the past 2 weeks, not much has been going on extracurricularly at Hall. It's been a big period of transition as the quarter has ended, and students and staff are mostly focused on adjusting to the new hybrid 2.0 schedule. Similarly to the original hybrid schedule, the majority of students probably preferred the in-person school days as opposed to the online days, just because there's that social connection. For most classes, online students are either allowed to log off of the Google Meet before the end of class, or they're given independent work to work on, typically on paper, while remaining on the Google Meet for that those last minutes. Once students have fully adjusted to the new schedule, I plan to send out a survey to the student body to get more specific feedback on what has and has not been working for them with the new schedule. But as of right now, I think it's a little bit too early to tell, as it's still our first few days with the new schedule. As Rochelle mentioned, last week marked the end of the fall sports season, and as Mr. Moore announced, the CIAC has postponed the start of the winter sports season until January 19th. And also congratulations to the 4 Hall students who have signed their NLIs last week. Hall has also scheduled our annual Pajama Day for December 10th for the red group and December 17th for the blue group. Students can bring in money to wear pajamas to school, and the funds will be donated to the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. And finally, similarly to what Rochelle said, I just want to thank the entire Hall community for getting through the first quarter of the school year. It's been very different than years past, but we got through it and we're continuing to persevere through this odd year.
As of this time, that's the plan. Request for future agenda items. We do have the item that was mentioned just a few moments ago regarding the equity statement. Are there any other requests for future agenda items? Okay, if not, we do not have anybody here to provide comments at the end of the meeting. There's nobody in the Google Meet and no members of the public in the room. So we'll skip ahead to executive session. There's no executive session. And so I will call for a motion to adjourn. Lorna, and seconded by Liz. And meeting is adjourned at 9:14 p.m. Thank you, everybody.